Hey guys, I'm Ian McMinn and this is Path to I Am. Today we'll be talking about being your own greatest guide. A really fun idea we can play around with when um, having questions on this path of developing meditative awareness, mastering my state, figuring out how to live from flow versus force, is this idea that I actually can have all of the answers that I need to move forward in my life, to follow my highest passion moment to moment, and to be fulfilled. That it's all of the answers are within me. So whenever I have a deeper question about myself, I can realize if I can just raise my frequency, get into flow, get into greater states of joy and fun, etc., playfulness, I will have the answers given to me right when I need them. So, this is the idea of being our own guide. And it doesn't mean we don't search for guidance in sources outside of ourselves, etc., right? My passion may lead me to, finding a teacher that's really helpful that gives me specific information. But the idea is that I can be my own central guide, and actually I am my own greatest guide, that I will always find the greatest guidance within me, and then I may get reflections of that externally with mentors, teachers, etc., in sources of information outside of myself, but that ultimately it starts and ends with me, right? So um, if I can start coming from this place, I can start really shifting my energy in a lot of ways, because I'm not just endlessly asking and seeking information, right? To sort of fill some hole. I can realize that it's right here, and I can slow down, I can ease up, I can focus more on what's really calling to me in a positive sense moment to moment. And as I shift my focus to that, instead of, oh, why can't I figure out XYZ problem in my life? Why can't I figure out, my financial situation, my relationships, et cetera, I get to take my focus off of a problem-oriented one, which, even though it seems like it's focusing on problems will help solve them, if I'm coming from a problem-oriented place, I'm going to create more, right? Whereas if I truly want to have real solutions, I need to shift to a solution oriented place anyway, right? So, this idea that, oh, well, I have the solutions within me, great, let me shift my focus. It's going to allow me to change my energy. I'm going to shift from a negative place to a positive place. And instead of dividing my psyche against itself, which I talk about in my last video, positive energy versus negative energy, and why positive energy is actually where you find solutions, and it's where you collaborate, and it's where you integrate the different parts of your psyche that are splintered off, that you get to integrate negative aspects of yourself that you've cut off into the positive whole, so it becomes positive and you have a greater perspective. When you get to shift that energy point, things start to make sense. You start to have answers even before you have the questions, right? So this is a funny paradox. You can actually get answers to questions before you can even formulate the question in your mind. And so this is where, when you see a person that has deep conviction, think, you can think to any of the musicians you really like, any of the actors you really like, any of the other public figures you really resonate with. What you find is the ones that have genuine charisma and conviction have figured out how to live from this state. So a good example of that is, like, say, a Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence came right out of the gate at 19, 20, I think, and with a movie called Winter's Bone and a few others, went on to do the Hunger Games, as we know, but won Oscars. I think she'd won a few Oscars by the time she was 21. and has, took several years off a few years ago to start a family and has since come back to the movie scene. But she's, I think, famous not for just being a great actress, but for also being so entertaining in the media. I think she, like 2 years in a row at the Oscars, she tripped and fell down the stairs and was like cracking jokes about it as she was standing up and after and so on, right? Is she's so confident, but in ways that we often forget, we often don't realize with people. For additionally, she will often talk about how much of a spaz she is, how insecure she is, but with this loose sort of playfulness, right? So that playful, that's how you can find someone that's in a really high vibe place that gets to be their own guide and gets to get guidance on a lot of things immediately. They're coming from this playful, fun place, and they're very attractive to people just for some reason. For example, with her as well, one year at some award show, it was like maybe just last year, just recently, she was wearing this nice long dress, and while she was coming down the stairs, photographers took photos of her flip-flops. She was wearing flip-flops underneath. The reason she was is because, well, the previous few years, she was tripping wearing heels. So she wore flip-flops and was hoping the dress would cover it. But people saw that she was doing that, and it started a new fashion trend, right? So she's doing something because she's a total spaz, right? She's wearing these shoes because it's not going to cause her to trip, but it starts a fashion trend, right? Because she is so much in that place. So anyway, she's a really good example of that, someone that's in that frequency a lot of the time. And I guarantee you that someone like that, she gets guidance when she needs it, but she's not second guessing herself like the average person that we know and love, right? I mean, I'm often that guy, right? That is always second guessing myself and doesn't know who he is, and et cetera, et cetera. So when I have these questions, when I have these doubts within myself, I know that the answer is when I raise my frequency. So I can stop, I can reset. There's a million different ways we can learn to reset ourselves. Everyone's different, but we can, as I say, we can develop our toolkit so that we can reset ourselves in literally every situation. And we can get into that high flying place. And guess what? We always get the answers. I'm sure you all have had an experience where you've been so doubtful of yourself and so unsure of what you're going to do. And all of a sudden you have a conversation with a friend or you see something funny online and it makes you laugh. And you have this sense all of a sudden of everything's going to be okay. Actually, what was I worrying about? I'm going to be just fine, right? And so this is you actually getting into the frequency where you can receive all of the answers, all of the blessings that are coming to you, right? So this is the issue. This is why people live such a hellish existence. I would argue, everyone has their own opinion, but I would argue that the cause of so much suffering in the world, and just comes from my own I say vicious, I mean it in a positive sense, my own intense positive passion to study the mind and study my own state and study my own reality, is that we often live from such fear-based states that then creates external circumstances that then we react negatively to, that creates more negative external circumstances that we react negatively to, and we spiral down and down and down. Whereas someone like Jennifer Lawrence that's in that high-flying, playful state, she trips, she makes jokes out of it, she makes fun of herself, it goes viral, people love her for it. She ends up wearing flip-flops to avoid tripping, because she prefers not to, and it sparks a trend, right? So when negative things happen to her, obviously tripping isn't the biggest thing in the world, but I think a lot of people tripping at a globally visible event like the Oscars would be pretty humiliating. She's in that high-flying state where she can play it off, she can make fun of herself, she can laugh at herself. It keeps her in that state. And then really good things happen. She goes viral, people love her, and she starts fashion trends, right? So the answers that we want, I'd say 90% of the time in my experience, I can receive from myself by resetting to a playful state. And then the other, say 10%, I'm just throwing out arbitrary numbers that are rough estimations of my experience. Then maybe 10% of the answers I really want, I get when I'm in that high flying state from external sources. And guess what? It's when I don't need it in the sense of like thirst, like dying thirst or scarcity. I receive it in a nice, calm, smooth fashion in a way that's enjoyable to me when I'm already feeling pretty good and already in a good flow, right? So this is the paradox. When I am so desperate for answers in my life, for a guide that can guide me, I don't get the guidance. But when I stop and I realize that everything comes from me and I reset myself to a positive, high-flying place, things start to make sense. I start to receive downloads. I start to think in a more collaborative way with the circumstances in my life. I start responding positively to negative circumstances, right? Like I'm sharing with the Jennifer Lawrence thing. And I start to get positive results out of negative circumstances, which lead to more positive circumstances and more positive results, and so on and so on. And even if there is a negative circumstance, I'm going to get a positive effect because I start responding positively. So this is the additional point is I can get, even if my life is terrible and there's nothing good about it, and we don't need to turn a blind eye to that fact, we can be honest about it, I can still remind myself, if I have a positive attitude, which is a collaborative one, where I'm going to see what I can get out of my reality, what I can learn from it, what I can absorb and receive from it, I get to start going up that ladder and getting positive downloads out of it. But it requires that I notice I'm in a negative state when I am and just resetting. It's all it is. It's just wax on, wax off, right? Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid style. If I can learn this, I can, every time I have a question or every time I'm in a negative state, I can reset and I can get into that solution-oriented, answer-oriented, positive state and get what I need. So anyway, guys, we went through a lot today, but I hope you enjoyed it. This is how to be your own greatest guide and to know that you are your own greatest guide. I'm Ian McMinn, and this is Path to I Am, and I will see you again in the future. Thanks so much, guys.